Hello guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we will talk about, in my opinion, one of the most important things in trading. It is journaling. And as you guys know, I created a new strategy and now I'm 2 weeks into trading that new strategy. And I realized one very important thing. Journaling is still so important. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're not disciplined enough to trade that strategy based on the rules, then that strategy will fail in your hands. And this is actually what happened to me because I overtraded. And I overtraded not because my strategy told me to, but because I wasn't reflecting on my mistakes and on my actions. And I started to journal again. And it reminded me as well that it's not about winning in the market. It is about doing the right thing, doing what your strategy tells you to do and nothing else. So now I will share the screen with you and show you exactly my journal. We will go through every point of my journal and I will tell you what worked for me in the past and how I journal every single trade and why it's so important to me. So yes, this is what my journal looks like. It has 4 pages and we will start at the first page. So this is an example of how it looks like it's empty. It's not my journal. It's as it says in German, a Vorlage, an example sheet. I don't know if it's called like that in English. So the first point is all about journaling pre-trading. Before you start to execute a trade, this is what you want to write down. First of all, you want to write down what your higher time frame analysis is. So what did you see on the higher time frame, or what do you see on the higher time frame? And what is your overall bias on the higher time frame, so that you can see at the end of your trading session if your bias was correct, if you stuck to your bias and only took trades with your bias. When you journal that long enough, you can see actually if you're overall right in the market or not, and on what days you're right on the market and on what days not. And as well a lower time frame analysis where you lay out more specifically what you see and what exact levels you want the market to see to trade towards, and where you potentially see yourself entering in the markets. Yeah, that is very important. And the third point here is a pre-trading emotions and activities journal. So before you start to trade, journal what did you feel? How did you feel? Did you have a successful day before you started to trade, or did you show up to the charts too late and this resulted in you taking emotional trades or you not being prepared enough for the session? So yeah, that's the first step of the trading journal. And of course here you can put in the date of today's day. So the second part of the journal is where you write down everything technical of your trades. So this page is only if you took any trades. If you didn't take any trades, you have nothing to write down here. So the first columns, I have my accounts. So you can write down your starting balance of your account if you only have one, but if you have multiple accounts, you can write down multiple starting balances so that that is always tracked and written down. So then you can write down in the next column with how many accounts you traded, then the date, then what pair you traded. So for me, there's always going to be NQ. A lot of people trade multiple pairs. So that will be an important thing for you to journal. Then you can write down what session you traded. So if you traded the Asia session, the London session, the New York AM session, or the New York PM session, then you can journal if the trade was inside of a macro. For all the ICT people, you know what I mean with a macro. It's the time window of every 15 minutes before a new hour starts and the first 15 minutes after the new hour started. So for example, if you trade the New York AM session and you took a trade in the 9:45 until 10:15 macro, then you can write it down here so that you can see if it correlates with your wins or your losses. If you have almost every time a win when you trade inside of a macro and you have almost every time a loss when you trade outside of a macro. So the next column would be if you took a long or a short. The next is your stop loss, how many points your stop loss was, what your lot size was, then what your risk to reward was or would have been if the trade turns out to be a loss. Then I always fill out this part as well because I think it's important to know still what your trading idea would have been or where you would have exited the trade and if it would have been a good risk to reward. The next one is the dollar amount of your risk. How much did you risk on that trade? Then the next point is the take profit. How many points would have been your take profit or how many points was your take profit? The next column is very, very important in my opinion. One of the most important factors in trading, and that is time. And first, when I started to journal my trades, I can remember I never ever journaled when I took a trade and how long it took for that trade to play out. And a lot of people in trading neglect time, but time is, I would say, the most important factor in trading. And it's very important to write that down so you can see when you tend to take trades and when it turns out to be good and when it turns out not to be good. So you can see there what tendencies you have in the markets. For example, some people tend to be overzealous and jump into trades way too early when the session starts, for example, and some people way too long, and this you will see when you journal it. So very, very important in my opinion. So in the next column, I really like to journal at what point, at what time did the last candle trade to my break even, to my entry point before going to my take profit. When I have a loss, I don't journal that. But when I have a winning trade, I really like to write it down because most of the time, at least for me and my strategy, the best trades are when we not even come back to the entry anymore after entering, or we come back to break even like in the first 5 minutes of the trade. But after that, it should go toward my direction, toward the trade direction, toward the take profits. So the next one is if you had a winning trade, a loss, or a break-even trade, then you can write down your the dollar amount of gain you had per account and the dollar amount of gain you had in total with all the accounts combined. So in these columns, I journal when I win a trade, but also when I lose a trade. So it's either a positive number or a negative number. So the next one would be a TradingView picture. So I use TradingView to execute my trades. And so what's very cool, you can screenshot your trade, you can screenshot your chart, and then you can look back not only on what you've written down, but also you can see visually how your trade looked like. And I think that is also very important because when you only see the things you've written down, all the technicals, you don't really see how the market behaved in that very scenario. But if you then reflect on it and see how the chart looked like if we had, for example, a choppy price action or if we had a clean price action. So the next thing I also really like to do, but actually I deleted it from my current journal because I have a different document for that where I make a screenshot of the chart where there would have been a possible setup and it would have worked out. And at the end, you can write down your ending balance. So you have starting balance and then ending balance after you took the trade. And the reason why I only have one column here is because I always use my leader account. So then the next page is the process. And what I mean with that is here I write down all the credentials it took for me to take that trade. So all the confluences, and if the confluences were there or weren't. For me, I don't need to see all of the confluences to enter the trade, but looking back, it's always nice to see if they were there or not. The date again, then we have a smart money reversal. How did the smart money reversal look like? I have very specific credentials there, but in this video, I will not go too deep into that topic. There will come a lot of content in the future on every single thing I use for my trades. The next thing is SMT. Did we have a crack in correlation in the markets of, in my case, with ES or YM when I trade NQ? And then TV, this should mean trading view picture. So again, I will make a picture of that. Then I will write down what my point of interest was and if it was a reasonable point of interest and if I was following my rules there. So the next thing I write down is something very specific to my strategy. So the next thing is CSD. How did the change in the state of delivery look like? It's similar with SMR, but there are two distinct differences. But I will not go, like I said, too deep into that topic. It's just my confluences. You can switch it out with your confluences, what you like to see before you enter a trade. Then the next thing, what was my entry? What was my entry mechanism? For example, did I use a rejection block? Did I use an order block? Did I use a IFVG? Did I use a FVG? Did I use a turtle soup? Of course, I don't use all of those things, but yeah, there you can write down if you actually took your entry based on your rules. Then the next thing, drawn liquidity. What was your drawn liquidity and did we reach the drawn liquidity? And as well, again, a trading view picture. And the last page is, in my opinion, almost the most important page because it tells you so much about yourself and your psychology in trading. So again, the date, and let's start at the first column. Why did I enter the trade? And this is very different from just writing down very objectively what your entry mechanism was. Here you can be really honest and I tell you, be very honest with yourself. Even when you messed up, write down, oh yeah, I see it. I just entered out of FOMO and I had no real trading idea or plan what I'm doing there. I just did it because I didn't want to miss the move. You can write it down there. And I also have a description here, like, be honest, did you have real confluences or was it an emotion-driven decision? Then the next one is effort. And I really, really love how I built that journal because it was actually based on a book I read at one point. And the book is called something with confidence. I don't know right now, but I will just blend it in here somewhere that you can see it because it's a very good book, especially for traders. Like, it's not a 100% like trading related book, but it's so good to read if you want to build your confidence, you know? So, effort. Identify one moment where you buckled down and honestly gave it your all, where you were tempted to ease off a little bit, but didn't. I always like to write down, I gave it my very best to, and then write down what you gave your very best. Like, it's so important to fill all of those things out, even if you had the shittiest ever trading session, and also if you had the best trading session ever. Because if you had the shittiest trading session, even if you messed up, but you had good intentions at one point, you can write it down there. And it's so important to write that down because then you pull yourself out of your emotional state and then you get a very neutral perspective on what is really going on or what was really going on. And also you give yourself a lot of grace there, a lot of grace, a lot of positive self-talk. And I don't say to paint things more beautiful than they actually are. Like, you can write it down when you made a mistake. That's very important, but it's also very important to not blame yourself for the mistake. Don't say, oh my God, I'm so dumb. Why did I enter this trade? Like, even a blind person would have seen that this was a bad trade. Something like that. But to write down, I'm so sorry, but to write down that I see that that was not a reasonable trade, but I'm so glad I took it because now I reflect on it and I can learn from it so that in the future I will not take such a trade again. Yeah, but very important. So the next thing is success. Write down something. I don't care what it is, something that you see as success. And even if it's just you showing up and journaling that trade when you didn't feel like it. I write it down so often that I see it as a success, even if I had the worst trading day ever, when I sit down regardless and journal my trade. That is one of the biggest successes for me in every single trading session. But you can say whatever you want. Like, you can also say, I had a very clean trade execution, something like that. I managed to trade very good. Progress. Identify one instance of progress. Did I read this one? I don't think so. Identify one success that you experienced during that session, one moment where you got something right. Yeah, okay. I didn't read it, I think. Doesn't matter. Let's move on to the next. Progress. Identify one instance of progress that you experienced during the session, one moment where you got better at something, even if you didn't get it completely right. As well, so important. Trading is all about getting better, a little bit better, like 0.001% every single session, just a little bit better. But also don't blame yourself if you didn't feel like you made progress. But remember that every single trading session, if you see it or not, you are making progress every single time because you showed up another day. And that in itself is progress. So find something, the littlest, like the tiniest thing, write it down, or the biggest thing, whatever. Maybe yesterday or last week, I was so impatient with my exit. This week, I also exited the trade out of FOMO, but I felt like I was more aware of being more patient on my exits. So, like I said, you don't even have to see the progress externally, but you can also journal your progress internally. And just a switch in your mindset and in your thinking is progress. The next one, where could have done better. So important. These last two are also very important because the columns before, you gave yourself a lot of grace and you looked for the positive things and what you did right, and you gave yourself a lot of positivity. But in the last two columns, you can critique yourself in a positive, constructive way. Guard your mind. Never talk negatively down on yourself. You can record though when you did something wrong. Like, I'm happy that I see where I did something wrong because that is an area I can work on. So yeah, write down where you could have done better. For me, what I write down very, very often is that my entry could have been better. Like, my entry was not the cleanest, or maybe I shouldn't have taken the trade at all because we were in a consolidation, something like that. And the last one learning of today's session. And I almost every time don't only write down one learning I had in the trading session, but whatever comes to my mind. So basically, after getting out of my emotional state. So do you see what we did before? Before we made sure we get out of the emotions to get a very objective, neutral, perspective on things, so that in the end you can give yourself a very objective and honest recommendation, almost like you're talking to another person. So yeah, everything you learned, write down. But yes, that's that for today's video. I really, really hope that it helped you. But one last thing I really want to emphasize and tell you is that it's normal to have days where you don't feel like journaling. The most important thing on those days is to not blame yourself that you didn't journal, but just show up the next day and journal the next trading day. I skipped a lot of trading days where I didn't journal. But what I realized, if I like it or if I don't like it, every time when I journaled, something positive came out at the end of the day. And also my mood was much, much better after I journaled compared to all the times where I didn't journal. So I guess it's also important to journal, not only to reflect on your trades and to improve on your mistakes, but also to make sure that the emotions of the trading session from yesterday, that you don't bring that into the next day, so that you have something like a tool to release every emotion you had on that session, so that you don't carry it in the future. But yeah, that's that. And before I leave, I would really appreciate if you leave this channel a follow and like and comment below this video if it helped you, if it didn't help, and something like that. But see you in the next one. Bye bye!